Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Hello and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I'm Rivka Rivera.
And I'm Frank Capello. So a little bit of context for our listeners right off the bat. Rivka just got done with a night shoot. And that doesn't mean anyone was trying to shoot her at night. That means that she was working on a film production all night long. So how are you feeling today?
I feel loopy. I did not sleep. That's not true. I took like hour segmented naps, and then I had to come. So we went till 6:30 a.m. And this was before anyone's like scab. This was a really talented friend of mine who's a filmmaker, their short film. And so when you do a short film like this, it's SAG ultra low budget. I mean, we're getting paid, very like $125. No one's making a profit. No one's streaming. This isn't even like a waiver situation.
Yeah, SAG has different tiers for what types of productions and how they're classified based on what their budgets are. So like everything that's happening in the strike right now has pretty much nothing to do with how ultra low budget productions are classified and how they're contracted.
Yeah, I mean, we're fundraising. It's professional, but it's also like passion work. So passion work. That's not the right word for it. But again, loopy. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. The people who worked on it were super talented. So it was a great time. But I am, exhausted. And actually, one of the things I wanted to talk to you about today was reality television, which talk about being exhausted. We'll get into some of these exploitative practices, but one of them on a lot of shows, particularly shows like Love is Blind, which I have watched my fair share of, aka every episode possible.
I think it's okay to say that you're a fan. You were a fan before we found out how abusive they were to these people on set. So I think you're covered.
Sure. And it's like no secret that The Bachelor does the same thing. It's like, but I'm really feeling how and I just like under lack of sleep. And then if someone was to give me alcohol right now, I don't know what I'd say. I don't know what I'd do. It's
almost like that's what reality TV show producers are counting on.
It almost is. But what's important is that, so there's some really big news as of yesterday, actually, in terms of reality television and union. So reality TV workers are not unionized. Hosts are, but their reality TV workers as of now are not covered in the union.
The performers.
Yes.
Because I imagine a lot of reality production crews are unionized through IATSE and other production unions.
Yes, that's correct. And actually, so we mentioned Love is Blind, but there are two cast members from season 2, Nick Thompson and Jeremy Hartwell, who've been doing a lot to speak out on the issue since their season, since actually the summer of 2022. And so they have created this foundation called the You Can Foundation, Unscripted Cast Advocacy Network, to support unscripted cast members by giving them mental health and legal services. And Jeremy also filed a lawsuit against Netflix and Kinetic on behalf of Love is Blind and Ultimatum cast members in the summer of 2022, alleging that they broke California labor law. But they've come out, and we really recommend checking out this More Perfect Union video, which maybe we can link in our show notes. But they talk about this kind of exploitation, which includes, as we mentioned, and I'm not suggesting I'm joking. I by no means was exploited on my film shoot last night. But there is this psychological moment. They take your phones, your wallets, your passports, and they're filming 18 to 20 hour days. And
so all day.
So all day. And being paid $7.14 on the hour, essentially.
Yeah, that was the shocking thing. When they did their breakdown of how much they were actually paid per hour, it was less than federal minimum wage.
Yes.
They're also being sequestered from anyone and everyone. Like you said, they've had their phones removed. They have no contact with the outside world. So all they are doing is being sleep deprived, being filmed all day, and then getting pumped with alcohol. That was the other shocking thing, is that they didn't really provide food for them.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Nick says he lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks being on this show because their food is being messed with, their sleep is being messed with. Now, I am not saying I don't think some of these people maybe found some love. But I'm telling you, I could fall in love with like a lot of things right now. Like I am loopy. I am looking for comfort when I don't get my sleep. So, yeah, I mean, again, and what I love is that Nick really calls it out. So does Jeremy, as this is unregulated capitalism. This is pure exploitation. And what's interesting about this intersection, right, is like, as we've discussed before, reality TV really took a boom at the last writers' strike. So there's this weird relationship between, and sort of a little unspoken antagonism of like, for scripted media actors and what we do, that like when we can't do what we do, that's when reality TV comes in and like takes our work, but they're being exploited just the same.
For also anyone that doesn't know a lot about TV production, it is massively cheaper to produce reality TV than it is to produce scripted television because, you know, paying actors, paying, you know, grips to light the sets correctly, paying writers, paying directors, all you got to do is get some real people plying with alcohol and start rolling. So it's much cheaper for companies to do reality than scripted.
Exactly. And so Nick and Jeremy and like a lot of people have been speaking out about this since 2022, and I'm sure maybe before that, but they've been laying the ground. And then in comes Bethany Frankel, who you may know as the CEO of Skinny Girl, which started as pre-packaged low-carb margaritas, and she's now a millionaire. But she did get her start on Real Housewives, so she kind of her claim to fame, I guess, is reality television. And she came out with this TikTok, which kind of blew up because it's being credited for something that SAG has said. But we'll play the TikTok first. But what I do want to say before we play the TikTok, and I'll say it probably again after, is that, like, listen, Bethany Frankel is extremely problematic. She's made extremely racist comments. She is, like, has built a brand on this girl boss hyper capitalism. She was the one before the Kardashians said it. She had a quote that was, "Most people don't work hard. Most people move papers around the desk, metaphorically, and think they're working hard." So there's a lot of complexity here. However, this TikTok, I think, will speak for itself. And then let's play it, we'll discuss it, and we'll talk about its real-world implications.
The reality TV reckoning, the new Bethany Claus. Reality stars are the stepchildren, the losers, the mules, the pack horses, the ones that the entertainment industry is going to rely on right now to carry the water and do the heavy lifting when real stars, real A-list Hollywood is on strike. The issues are different than the ones for actors. We are not actors. We are not playing other people. We are not saying the words that are written for us. We are exposing ourselves, our families, our lives, our children. Look at Raquel having an affair. Her life is pretty much ruined, and at what price? Reality television exploits affairs, bankruptcy, falling off the wagon, not really having what you say you have, saying something inappropriate, risking cancellation every single time the camera goes on. I recognize that a young, doe-eyed reality star to be wanting fame at any cost doesn't know what they're signing, and they can't afford a good lawyer, but they'll sign away their entire life just for a chance at fame. I recognize that nurses and teachers and minimum wage employees think this is ludicrous because they are also not treated fairly. I acknowledge that it is not fair. This is a separate, very particular matter where people's names and likenesses are used and exploited forever. I do not have the idiot guide to starting a union in one day, but I will learn quickly.
Wow, Norma Ray, Bethany Frankel, unbelievable.
Who would have thought?
Not I. I'm glad you laid out all of like the preamble about, you know, the problematic stuff, all of that. Important to keep in mind, but on a lot of this, she's right. I mean, like reality TV actors, performers, however you want to categorize them, should not be treated that way. That's like, as far as working conditions go in the entertainment industry, that's probably as exploitative and horrendous as it gets.
And so as of yesterday, I probably started to say this and didn't finish, but as of yesterday, August 10th, SAG-AFTRA now says, and people are saying it's kind of like immediately after this, probably in response to this, at least they're crediting Bethany with this, that it is working toward the protection of the reality performers in an effort to end the, quote, exploitative practices that have developed in this area and to engage in a new path to union coverage. Quote, we are tired of studios and production companies trying to circumvent the union in order to exploit the talent that they rely upon to make their product. That's fucking cool.
Good. I would love to see reality TV performers get protection through SAG, and this is the time to demand it.
Yes, and it's exciting because this is what we've talked about this. Most people are saying this. This is the moment where it's needed of like, this is all labor. All labor. There's no like competitive, like you should get exploited, but we shouldn't. This is everyone everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
I was having a conversation with my Uber driver this morning who was asking me about the SAG-AFTRA strike and was just like, yeah, that's right. Like we all have general strike. Like we all have to strike. It's the only thing that makes sense. And so the more people who get on board, the more groups of people that are like, oh, is this the moment? Yes, it's the moment. Even if Bethany Frankel gets the credit, who cares?
And I think that's such an important point that like the need for some people to, classify some working class jobs as either more working class or less working class than others. Like people who are like, who gives a shit about actors? They're not like sanitation workers or they're not factory workers or when like Starbucks started unionizing, there were people that were like, Starbucks workers aren't the same as people who, like work on a factory floor. And the unfortunate truth is if you are an employee, you are getting exploited. It doesn't matter what your job is. If you are an engineer at Google getting paid $200,000 a year, you are getting exploited because you are generating more wealth than what you are being paid. The only class of people in any organization that don't, through our various labor social dynamics and labor laws, the only people that don't really count as workers are managers because you're technically in a different class within an organization. So I think that's so important to underline. And, like something I've been thinking about is like, I would love to hear something from the employees of Netflix, from the employees of Amazon, from the employees of Apple. I would, or people that work within the Hollywood studio system, because, I'm sure there are some people that are like towing the company line and are like, well, what the actors and writers are demanding is, unreasonable. And then I'm sure there are a lot of people who are like, oh, I really want them to get what they want, but like, what can I do? I'm just a development exec. I'm just an assistant. I'm just a whatever job at this giant company. And those people wield a lot of power. Like, can you imagine if like a faction of Netflix employees came out and were like, hey, we're all going to go on strike until you all give the actors and writers what they deserve. Like, that's power. That's how power gets wielded. So I don't know. It's just it's stuff to think about. But I'm really glad to hear that that there's movement on this for the reality performers because it's long overdue.
Yeah, a win for anyone's labor is a win for all of our labor. Does that make sense? What I just said? Where am I?
Yeah, you're at home. Don't worry. It's all right. All right. Well, before Rivka falls asleep, we should get to our conversation for today. But before we do, we just want to let our listeners know that this podcast is produced by the two of us.
We perform all of the necessary labor to make this show happen.
And as we're trying to practice our anti-capitalist values, we will not be selling ads on this show. We rely completely on community support to keep the show going. So if you're able to support us, please consider subscribing to our Patreon.
For just $5 a month, you get access to our entire back catalog of premium episodes, and you'll be directly supporting this show. You can also leave us a one-time contribution in our tip jar, and you can find all of those links in the episode description in your podcast player or by going to mvcpod.com.
You can also help us out for free by leaving a rating and review for this show on your podcast player. It only takes a few seconds, and it is very helpful in boosting the algorithm and getting this show in front of more people, so we really appreciate it. All right, we are going to take a quick break. We'll be right back with our conversation about trading places with Jamel Johnson. All right, we are thrilled today to be joined by Jamel Johnson. Jamel is a stand-up comedian from Woodbridge, Virginia. He made a name for himself in the DC comedy scene through a hard-to-hate mixture of non-threatening yelling, weird stories, and impressively specific but not alienating sports and music references. He's now located in Los Angeles, where things are going okay. You can hear him on one of his many podcasts, including the Brandon Jamel Show. Jamel, thank you so much for joining us on Movies versus Capitalism.
I cannot believe you read all of that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean, I requested a bio, and you gave me a bio.
I gave you my bio from my currently dead Squarespace page.
R.I.P.
Yeah, no, we're gonna bring it back to life.
What, did you switch over to Wix or something?
No, I just stopped paying the bill on time.
Sure. Mm-hmm. I think that's why most websites end, is because people get that yearly Squarespace renewal email, and they're like, "Oh, I don't think this website has benefited me at all."
I just lost one, actually. Yeah.
Damn. Condolences.
I know. Thank you. And I'm been debating. I'm like, we'll see. We'll see if someone snatches it from the grave, or maybe it'll be there waiting for me in a little bit.
Jamel, before we get into talking about trading places, we wanted to ask you a little bit about your work in the LA comedy scene. Specifically, I know you've been doing a lot of stuff at Little Secret LA recently. We actually just had Devin Young on the podcast a few weeks ago, and I had mentioned that we were friends, and she was like, "Oh, Jamel's the best." She mentioned this how to blow up a pipeline panel that you hosted and like prepared a bunch of questions for. And then I guess, did you just host the Chris Small, Steve Donziger Hot Labor Summer Show? How did that, like, first tell me how you got into that scene, and then tell us a little bit about how that show went.
Honestly, as I get into most things, fell backwards into it. I think I did some stand up there like sometime last year. I was doing a show with Brandon Wardell famously of the Brandon Jamel Show. So Brandon's already in the mix with these guys. He's doing a show. I get referred. I do the show. It goes well. They have me come back for this How to Blow Up a Pipeline panel, which a movie. I don't know if you've seen the movie yet.
Have
you seen it?
No, I haven't seen it yet.
Is it even out?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It
was
is.
like,
out.
You can stream it.
It's one of them. And I don't even remember preparing questions, dude. I watched the movie and I was doing the panel and I was kind of like, I don't know. Do I talk? When do I talk? Is it now or do I talk? And then I was up there. I was trying to put the pieces together. I meet Steve Donziger through this. Mm-hmm. He was at the panel.
Okay.
A very nice guy. And I guess he thought something I said was funny. I don't remember being funny at all. I'm going to be honest. I feel like I thought I went 0 for a million at that panel.
Was Steven the one that was like, "You got to come host when we're back"?
It was Devin, but Steve, when he sees me, I'm always shocked he remembers me. Like, dude, you were in the feds, man.
But he's seen so few people for such a long time that now he's probably just like, he's like, I'm just like retaining faces and names now. I'm just so glad to be actually seeing people out here.
That's it.
I hosted a panel. The panel was good. Chris Small's amazing. The guy can command a room. That's the one big note that I have. It's a bunch of people at the show, and it's this venue. They're over by LA River. Like, they were like by the river, like at the river. It's like a
in
block,
Frogtown now, right?
Yeah, super Frogtown. This is like Toad Town. This ain't even where the frogs be at. It's over on the side. And it's a great space. It's huge, nice, open. Got the, there's like some indoor, big outdoor where the show is, but there's like this weird just like a divider in like a physical division in the room. Just a piece of metal, which is fine. But it's just, if you are going to watch a show or be at a thing, you would pick a side. You would either stand on one side of the metal, another side of the metal. You know what I'm saying? And it's just, everybody was kind of further away from the stage because of this metal. And then Chris Smalls gets on stage. This is like 30 minutes in the show. As soon as he gets on stage, he's like, "Yo, can y'all come to the stage, please?" And then everybody at the venue is immediately, now everybody thinks the metal's cool.
He did the same thing. We saw their show in New York, and he did the exact same thing. He was just like, "Why is everyone standing so far back? Get up over here." And I got to see him lead a Labor Day march last year, and I was just like, "Damn, this dude's got like theater experience. Like, he is commanding, like, in the middle of Times Square, just like commanding like a giant crowd." And I was like, "Damn, this is very impressive."
I mean, dog, where's he from?
He's from Jersey.
Jersey? Yeah, you can't, bro. Yeah, you can't live in Newark. Everybody in Newark has that skill. It's like straight up.
I believe
it's like, if you were black and from the tri-state area, you for sure know how to rap. You can actually rap. You could actually have a career as a rapper. You could actually lead a march. You could actually
all transferable skills, just being from the tri-state.
Making it to 25. If you're from Newark and you make it to 25 years old, the government should give you a communications degree. They should just hand you one because you made it, bro.
That's actually a pretty perfect segue to us talking about this movie, because there's a lot of just like transferable skills happening in this movie.
See what I'm saying?
Yep.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So, Jamel, you picked a movie for us to watch that I'm excited to discuss with you, because before we started recording, you mentioned that you know this like the back of your hand. This film is Trading Places, directed by John Landis, written by Timothy Harris and Herschel Weingrod, starring Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, Jamie Lee Curtis, Denholm Elliott, Ralph Bellamy, and Don Amici. The budget for this film was $15 million. It grossed $90 million worldwide. And this tells the story of affluent Wall Street executive Louis Winthorpe III, played by Aykroyd, and down-on-his-luck street hustler Billy Ray Valentine, Murphy, when Winthorpe's bosses, the successful brokers Mortimer and Randolph Duke and Duke, can't settle their debate about how much a person's environment influences their decisions. The brothers decide to use Winthorpe and Valentine as test subjects and place a bet on the outcome. Using unsavory means, the Dukes strip Winthorpe of his entire life of luxury and install Valentine in his position at their company. When Winthorpe and Valentine uncover the scheme, they set out to turn the tables on the Dukes.
And boy, do they. Jamel, a little bit of historical context for when this movie came out. This movie was released on June 8th, 1983. So we are 2 years into Ronald Reagan's first term as president, about a year and a half after he broke the air traffic controller strike by firing over 11,000 striking workers. In July, the world's first dedicated hospital ward for HIV and AIDS patients opens in San Francisco General Hospital. In the world of movies, Return of the Jedi is released in theaters. The film Gandhi wins 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture. And that November, A Christmas Story is released in theaters. Vanessa Williams becomes the first black woman to be crowned Miss America. McDonald's introduces the McNugget onto its menu. And the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program, DARE program, is launched. And finally, Michael Jackson's music video for Thriller is broadcast for the first time.
What a year for American culture. Huh?
Hold on, bro. You started with Reagan. This is Reagan's first hit record.
Yeah.
His first hit single. He goes platinum 7 times in his run.
Yeah, he wins all the Grammys.
And then the McNugget came out. The McNugget might outlive us all.
It's always wild to look back and think about like how much bad stuff was happening, but also like how much just either good or innovative stuff was happening, like the McNugget, like Thriller coming out.
And that's how they got us, man. If Thriller never came out, we could have been focused on how fucked up this shit was.
Yeah, it's Michael Jackson's fault for distracting everybody through the rest of Ronald Reagan's first term. He never would have won that re-election in a landslide if it wasn't for Thriller.
It was literally too good for people to focus.
That's correct.
It's 10 platinum singles on there, man.
Yeah.
It's so bad. Now I'm just picturing those 11,000 workers that were fired by Reagan just doing the Thriller dance.
Yeah, they probably left. They walked out like zombies for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay. So Jamel, this was your immediate go-to movie. Tell us about it. Why is this such an important film to you, and why did you pick it to talk about on this podcast?
This movie is one of my favorite movies. This movie is one of the first movies I saw as growing up and thought, oh shit, this is it. This is the movie, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I bought this movie on DVD full price. I then lost that DVD and then stole another copy of the DVD when they had changed the box art and it was in a cheaper box. This is one of those DVDs that got printed different times. This movie is so important.
It's a classic, yeah.
It's a goddamn classic. And I went to Philly twice this year. So I just said, I've been to Philly twice this summer.
What were you in Philly for?
I was doing some stand-up and then, more eating ice cream.
So, Jamel, I'm curious, like, I'd imagine, so like you're a kid, you're introduced to this movie. I remember seeing this at a younger age, and I remember like the comedy of it really hitting for me at that time. I don't think I really was picking up on a lot of the politics of the movie, but now that you're a much older adult man, when you watch this movie, rewatch this movie, like what do you take away from it in terms of its political messaging?
I feel like the movie's trying to convince me to get into the stock market as a child. And I wish I had as a child, and I don't want to now. When I watch it now, what do I think? I can't believe that's what the fucking stock exchange used to look like. I can't believe this whole building's carpeted.
And everyone's smoking cigarettes.
It does. It's like a giant mosh pit. Like, that's what I was like, this is just what I understand of Wall Street after watching that was like, it's just a mosh pit where everyone's just
running around. Just running around with sheets of paper.
And that is appealing to kids. Like, there is something very appealing about just like the chaos. Because you're just like, oh, I want to run and just mash bodies and scream money. I did at least.
Sheets of paper, they're just printing out a dumbass looking, like those sheets of paper where it's 5 different copies and one's like yellow and one's pink. You know what I mean? And it's like, it smells weird. And these little sheets of paper are like whole companies' existences and just the fate of a town on a sheet of paper, and some guy in a suit is just running around in circles bumping into people.
I mean, it still is. It's not different than that now. Maybe there's no carpet. I don't know.
Yeah, that's it. I think all they did was get rid of the carpet.
Maybe less paper involved.
Yeah, they're very concerned about the paper.
They were concerned about their carbon footprint. That's why they changed over to a digital system on Wall Street. No, but you're right. It's like watching that and we're like, oh, so someone could lose millions of dollars just because like someone couldn't reach their arm into the pile of people fast enough? Like, that's it?
Which is a great analogy for like everything in this fucking country. I mean, it's interesting, Frank, because you said like you're not sure how much you understood as a child about the politics, but I do feel like watching this, I was like, it feels like it's very, that like actually kids would get it. It's like, it was very clear like who the bad guys were and exactly like the politics are. Like, can you reach your hand in the middle of the screaming people? Like, none of this is logical. There is no logic to Wall Street. Even now, even when we talk about like this, just like where we're at with our industry of like streaming, and you're like, it's all fucking made up. We don't know. Those streamers don't tell us what they're making off of streaming because it's all fucking made up. And they're just trying to like pretend in their little mosh pit on Wall Street that like they have more money than they have. And they don't want us to ruin that for them. Like, it's so silly.
And it's all based on feelings. It's all based on like I feel like maybe this company is valuable. Oh, now I don't feel that way anymore, and now it's not valuable.
And that's what's genius about the script, right? Because if for anyone who hasn't seen it in a long time or seeing it for the first time, like myself, the concept is that they're trading places and they have this bet. And what you learn from it is like anybody can do the job that Winthorpe, the like commodities trader, had, because it's also a fucking made up. Like anyone who's just like, I have a feeling, and what else? I mean, they're good at, they have a good gut feeling, I guess, but it's like what you're saying, like it's not hard.
I mean, and he was also, Billy Ray Valentine's character also had the advantage of insider trading.
Yeah, they do resolve the movie by committing a crime, technically.
Well, did y'all know this? They actually in 2010 made the Eddie Murphy rule in commodity futures trading based on the film.
No, what is that?
Yeah, I read, let's see. Trading commodities on inside information obtained from the government wasn't illegal when the film came out, but now it's illegal, and that happened in 2010. It was like a finance overhaul law, and this special provision is referred to as the Eddie Murphy rule.
Damn, was it ruled on by one guy playing 5 different characters? I think the judge and the clerk and the bailiff on the...
And he plays the senator who proposed the rule and the other senator who opposed it. I would watch that
I would watch that still. I think he also made that movie. I think it's called Distinguished Gentleman.
Rivka, I'm curious, because you said this is your first time watching it. So, like, what did you take away from, I guess, the politics, the class politics of this? Because it's like a lot of things I feel like it's really strong on, and then there are other parts where I feel like things are handled a little like clumsily or without a lot of care. So curious, like watching it at this age, 2023, what was your takeaway?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think what's interesting about also watching films now that we have this podcast and we've seen like the 80s a few times over, you know, we've talked about Ghostbusters and just like seeing this sort of aesthetic and this world and this Reagan era, the Wall Street of it all. Like nothing felt like, oh, that's really a nuanced new take. I mean, this felt very like Prince and the Pauper, which is a Mark Twain. And then you know what I mean? You're like, this is an older story that as long as there's been class politics, people have been talking about and debating. Like, so these old dudes who are those guys? Who are the ones from the Muppets? Like, right? They must have been based a little on them, right?
Statler and
Waldorf.
Yeah. So I already was like, oh, I kind of like feel like I know these characters. I mean, there wasn't like anything that I was like, wow, I never thought of anything this way, but it was fun. I mean, it was fun. It was a piece of history. Trying to think if anything really stood out. I mean, I wasn't surprised by like the random sexism. You know, you're like, now we're just gonna have boobs for boobs' sake, which I don't even know if that's sexist. Like that alone is not sexist because I mean, Jamie Lee Curtis great boobs, you know, like looks great in it, but you're like, there's absolutely no fucking rhyme or reason. That part was just like, okay, yeah, we are in the 80s. They're like, you know what would make this movie really pop, would really make our class politics just stick out, really drive the story forward. Just take your shirt off and get in bed with this man who has 103-degree fever. Why?
Has a deadly level fever.
Deadly level? That's like very
That's a
high. And then she just like, and doesn't even take her makeup off. She just, and doesn't even, it was so odd. She just takes her shirt off and gets in bed with this gross, sick man who also had just been like in that Santa. I didn't like it. So I guess that stood out to me the most.
No, I think that stood out to me as well because there's also like there's a lot of very explicit racism in this movie, but like a lot of the racism is attributed to the Dukes, to like the rich old crusty white guys. So like when they say racist shit, it's like offensive, but you're like, oh, I understand why they're doing it. They're trying to tell us that these characters are fucking horrendous dudes. But the sexism was just sexism. It was just like, yeah, Jamie Lee taking her shirt off. At the party that Eddie Murphy has at the house, just like two random women just taking their clothes off. I've been to a lot of working class parties, and no one is just like taking their boobs out during them. Like that doesn't seem to be a thing that just happens when non-rich people are hanging out.
Yeah, I guess true because Janelle Monáe kind of moved the bar, but that is still rich people hanging out.
Yeah, I expected at rich people parties. I expected at like rich, weird sex parties.
There's no problem taking shirts off, but this wasn't like a free the nip. This wasn't like any kind of statement. It's exactly what you're saying, Frank. And it wasn't the context for anyone listening of like Valentine gets in and like they give him Winthorpe's house. They give him all this. So suddenly he has all this stuff and he's like, okay, I'm going to throw a party. And then what did you make of this? Like this, I didn't understand what was happening where he suddenly gets really annoyed because everyone's like treating his stuff poorly, which it's a party. Like they're not doing anything outrageous. Then he kicks everyone out and you're supposed to be, I guess the message was like supposed to be like, now once you have nice things, you just don't want riffraff around. Like what was the message there? I know it's comedic. I get it. I'm not like taking it serious, but you know.
I guess it was supposed to be him realizing that he didn't want money to have a bunch of friends around. Like, yeah, like, you know, because he's like on the street trying to figure out how to like make ends meet. And then once the ends meet, he's like, well, maybe
they all want to
have a bunch of friends. And I don't know. I guess it was supposed to be the feeling that these people are like trying to take from.
It was weird. But the one character that I really appreciated was the butler. What was his name?
Coleman.
He had some interesting, because he was the one who's like, you know, he's in on it. He's like, God, fuck these old dudes who are playing this prank, but I have to play along because this is where I get my paycheck. So he's like in on it, but he was having a good time at the party. Like,
yeah, he was throwing shots back.
It was a strange, one of those like very 80s takes on. I mean, there was no nuance, I guess, but like, what are we? I guess I wasn't particularly expecting anything. I just thought I guess looking at this as like, how are people who are at this time in the 80s seeing this movie? Like, how is that affecting the way they then go out into the world? I do think there's like, you can't not relate it to the expectation, like, hey, baby, take your shirt off.
I mean, I just took it as like they needed to, like, for the sake of the story, they needed to demonstrate that, like, in fact, this whole trading places bet and scheme like works, I guess, because like that's what happened. That's like the arc of Eddie Murphy and Dan Aykroyd is like Dan Aykroyd like gets subsumed by his poverty and then like turns to crime, and then I guess on the flip side with Eddie Murphy, we're to believe like I guess the message is like once you have nice things, you want to protect them, and like it's all about like private property and possession, which is like it's a very capitalist value to be like, well, you see, the only thing that was like separating him from like giving a shit to not giving a shit is like now this stuff belongs to him, and if stuff belongs to you, you want to like keep it nice. So I guess that like that's what they were trying to do in that scene.
It is, because the whole arc is nature versus nurture, and nothing in between.
Actually, now that we're talking about this scene, it's making me realize that like that the kind of the message of this scene is, I think, is a little harmful, which is like as soon as you find yourself in like this upper class, then like now you're not gonna have patience for the working class people, and also all of the working class people are gonna be like disrespectful assholes and like come into your place and like fuck up all of your shit. So it's kind of having it a little bit both ways.
Well, that was there from the top.
Yeah, no, it was there from the top.
From the they do the morning Mr. Winthrop, and they show like dude can't even look people in the eyes, and then they go to the boss who's like even worse. That like if you have money, if you're there, you are a dick. Like that was,
Oh yes, that's what I thought was the strongest about this movie's politics, was like the way that they caricatured just like old crusty white guys and like rich old crusty, and not just old, but like all rich white people. Like that stuff was to me some of the funniest shit in the movie. Like the frat bros singing a cappella to their women, like just absolutely absurd.
Obviously my least favorite part of the film. That's usually if I'm rewatching it, because I'll throw it on a couple times a year, and whenever I'm one of those guys who will rewatch a movie that I've seen on TV with the curse words taken out. I'll like still, so if I'm halfway through Trading Places, when the frat bro scene comes up, that's usually when I'll go grab some cereal or something. I'll come back. Yeah,
it's a great pee break spot. But like that, the scene at the club when they accuse Winthorpe of stealing the money, that was like, and just all of the paintings of all of the old white men, and it's just like
the Heritage Foundation.
Just like major Heritage Foundation, Federalist Society vibes, and there's like nothing like watching that. You're just like, oh, I hate all of these guys. Like all of these guys are for sure the reason why we like the men literally in this room are why we have all of the problems in like the country today.
Yeah, it's scary.
So I thought that stuff was really strong, but then and rightfully so. And that's not to say that like every rich person is like a stuck up ass, but conversely, whenever this movie like depicted working class people or people in poverty, like there wasn't a lot of sympathy towards them. I didn't feel like I felt like that's the part that wasn't handled with a lot of care, is like the party scene, like the way that the way that they depict Eddie Murphy at the beginning is just like this hustler. Just it felt very broad. It felt like two white writers in the 80s being like, we know how it's like to be poor and non-white. Let us show you. And actually, I looked up the screenwriters, Weingrod and Harris, and they also co-wrote Space Jam. So,
whoa, range.
Wow.
Yeah.
They went from Philly to space.
But these guys have, I guess, built a career of, being two like white screenwriters who are like, we can write black characters. Like, we got it. We wrote Trading Places. Don't worry.
That's damn. And then Space Jam has like no white character. It's one black guy and aliens and cartoons. So they're like only writing for a black guy. At least there's white guys to talk with in Trading Places. Are the Looney Tunes white? Probably. I mean, I never really thought about it. The Looney Tunes are white.
We could go tune by tune and really debate this out.
I think it's tune dependent.
Like Donald Duck, definitely white.
Yeah, no, the Looney Tunes is white, dog. The Looney Tunes, Disney, they're all white. And then like the Animaniacs is like, that's when you start to, you know what I'm saying, get away from that a little bit.
I'm with you, Frank, on I thought it was really strong in its depiction of the Heritage Foundation. I went to prep school for 2 years, and I will never forget. That was because I'm from New York. It was like and I was from like Brook. I just had never experienced like something like that before going to this prep school. And I remember one day just like running into this hallway, and it just was like, it felt like this endless hallway with just pictures of white men, like as far as you could see on either side. And it's like, it literally, truly haunting. And I thought they got that, like, where you're just like, this is truly so haunting. And so
it's scary.
Our country, you can't Hamilton away from that. Like that core terrifying reality. I wish it had leaned in a little towards that kind of like, it was satirical, but I thought they could have even pushed the satire there and pushed some of the horror. I thought it did a great job of like moments where like they would build it up, and then you would just see like the Duke brothers' utter racism, you know, where they'd be like, oh, we were doing all this, but like we would never let this guy be here, you know? And I don't know, there was something they did it that I thought it was like maybe even at that time, it was like sharp enough that it was a moment. It didn't feel like under the radar. It was like they wanted us to hear that point.
You know what's missing, I think? There's nothing that really shows that the Dukes are like actually like idiots, or like something that just established that what they got is just because they were old white guys already. Like that is kind of missing. Like,
well, they actually say they built it. They are like, aren't they like, we're the founders of this trade?
A Duke has been on this exchange since it was founded. I'm sorry, that's my favorite line of all time.
This is the point in the podcast, Jamel, where we have you just do the film,
do voices. I'm fucking ready.
They kind of did it. I want to play this one clip because this was like the one bit in the movie that I thought did such a good job of kind of what you're talking about. Like, doesn't really paint the Dukes as idiots, but it does paint what they do as just sort of like bullshit. Totally high-level Wall Street upper-class bullshit, but still the same kind of bullshit.
Now, some of our clients are speculating that the price of gold will rise in the future, and we have other clients who are speculating that the price of gold is going to fall. They place their orders with us, and we buy or sell their gold for them.
Tell them the good part.
The good part, William, is that no matter whether our clients make money or lose money, Duke and Duke get the commissions.
Well, what do you think, Valentine?
Well, it sounds to me like you guys are a couple of bookies.
I told you he'd understand.
Yes.
That's it, right? Like that, for me, that's like the strongest part of the movie is like, you know, Eddie Murphy, a working class dude coming in, getting taught how the fucking stock market works and being like, oh, this is gambling. You guys are bookies. I had a meeting with a financial advisor years ago, and he said to me, like, this is a dude who like makes his money off the stock market, and he's like, do you know why they call it stock trading? And I was like, no, why? He's like, because the word gambling was already taken. I was like, oh, okay. You guys know this.
This was Eddie Murphy's, like, one of Eddie Murphy's first big movies.
Is this before Beverly Hills Cop or after?
I think it's before. I think it's like right before. And then Beverly Hills Cop comes, and then it's just over.
And it was originally written for Richard Pryor and Gene Wilder.
Ooh.
Which, honestly, I was like, I kind of wish I saw that movie.
Yeah, that's also a sick movie.
Eddie Murphy's great in this, but I mean, I would take Gene Wilder over Dan Aykroyd any day. Dan Aykroyd does not do it for me. That may have been part of my issue with the movie. It's like clearly a very personal thing. Just like I can't stand him. There it is.
I like how weak he was. That's what I like. Dan Aykroyd played a great weak man to me.
What do you mean by weak?
Just like you. Okay, so like when you get deeper into who Louis Winthrop is, you're just like, oh, this is this guy who's done nothing. He's done nothing.
Yeah.
He's been nowhere. He's like from a fucking like a hatchery, a rich hatchery of guys who's like never had to touch anything or be anywhere. And I liked not liking him.
I wanted Valentine to win. I get that like they had to like have the whole end of it, like the solidarity, them coming together, but then they're like, just so they could be more rich. Like nothing was actually resolved in that storytelling. I wish they like came together and Valentine was like, haha, I actually conned you too. Bye.
Yeah, that is an ideal.
We're supposed to believe that they're buddies now, those two. I mean, maybe. Valentine, I guess, didn't have any friends and was pretty antisocial, didn't want people taking their shirts off around him, so.
I guess you're right. That is, they do kind of let Dan Aykroyd off easy.
Rivka, I think it's funny that you say that about Dan Aykroyd because like I generally am not a big fan of Dan Aykroyd. I've like not that I dislike him, but I've never once been like, man, that is the funniest guy in the room. But I did think that he was actually very funny in this performance. Jamel, speaking to like what you're talking about, like especially in the beginning when he is just like pretending like he is tough, pretending like he is the one who apprehended Eddie Murphy at the arrest. And he's like, well, when it's a high pressure situation like that, it's either, live or, kill or live. And it's just like, oh, you're so full of shit. And he like, there are a couple of line deliveries that he gave and like that very like that affectation that he had and the way that he was speaking, like just like a rich asshole that he got me a few times in this movie, more than he ever had before. Would have been really cool to see Gene Wilder and Richard Pryor do this.
Gene Wilder would have been. They needed some. I mean,
I know
I'm with two
comedians,
so much, and so I don't want to offend, but sometimes I do feel like they run the risk, like with something like that. Like sometimes comedians can be little one note in their acting or like mislet, and I feel like Wilder would have gotten it.
The last thing I wanted to talk about before we go to the awards is kind of like the resolution of this movie, because like it really went off the rails for me during the whole like train car heist farce. That in rewatching,
buddy,
that's where it really, really lost me. Just up where you like you felt the 80s of it. You felt like this was written by white guys. Part of it. It's
Fun
like
day on set.
Eddie Murphy is doing, just like caricature, like dude from Africa voice. And then Jamie Lee Curtis comes in, lederhosen, like being totally sexualized. And then I wasn't expecting it, but Dan Aykroyd, full on blackface.
I was not expecting it either.
And then it's also like in the movie, they're presenting it in a way like Dan Aykroyd is believable. And the dude that they're trying to con, Paul Gleason, is like, oh yes, like that is another black man that has just entered the train. That is definitely not obviously a white guy with shoe polish on his face.
Some of the most unjust, unreal of the unrealness. Wowzers. Every movie, every comedy in the 80s really let you down at one point. They all take a turn just really letting you down for various reasons. And this is among the craziest. How much time was spent on this? Do you think this was like 2 days? You're looking at the call sheets, like, oh, we're doing the train again, huh?
But here's the thing. The shit that makes it on screen, that's like the tamest. Like, I'm just thinking about like what's being said as they're prepping freaking Aykroyd in hair and makeup. Like the jokes people think that they can make, because this is what's funny in this set. Same with like all those people who had to take their shirts off. You're like, they're just standing there in between takes topless with like a room full of men who like, you know what I mean? A room full of people who are like, we're literally just doing this because like the amount of sexual assault that no doubt went down on this set. And then the gorilla.
Oh yeah, classic.
Like the 80s was also like, it kind of made sense because like I was born in like the tail end of the 80s. Like these things were starting when you watch them. You're like, this is why. I was like, what's with the gorilla suits?
It really makes you wonder what they wrote first. Did they write the beginning of this or did they write the end of this first? How did we get here? Who was in charge?
It all started with that final shot with the gorilla. That was the inspiration for this whole movie. Some guy was like, I have this idea for this movie. I don't know how it starts, how the middle happens, but I know at the end one of the bad guys is gonna get fucked by a gorilla. That's all I know. And you know what? They got there.
And they did get there. Wow.
They made it happen.
Sick, dude. I've been talking about watching this movie because my girlfriend just saw Coming to America, which Coming to America is in the universe of this film. And I was like, oh, we got to watch Trading Places. It's one of the best Christmas movies. So much fun. And I forgot all about it. I was like, oh, right. The fucking where Dan Aykroyd is doing Chet Hanks in the train. Fuck. totally forgot that happened, man.
So wait, did that realization happen while you were both watching, and were you kind of like I'm just imagining? Did you watch together and you're like,
yeah, like when
you had to defend it to her?
Yeah, you're just like, hey, all right, remember when we were having fun before this? In about 6 minutes.
What you don't understand is there's
again.
a deeper meaning to it all. Like it's actually a critique of.
Maybe Trading Places isn't mandatory viewing in couples film society anymore.
That's funny because like I was watching it and my partner walked in the beginning, some of like the early like Duke brothers lines, and she was like, "What is this shit that you are watching?" And I was like, "No. They are going to be commenting on it. That is what this is about." And she's like, "Okay, I'm skeptical," and I was like, "You have every right to be skeptical."
And Angelica was right.
We will get there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My one question before we get to our awards is just, are you both as obsessed with limousines as I am still? Like, if someone's like, you want to get in this limo? I'd be like, oh, yeah. And I feel like this reminded me why. Like, limousines, the 80s, like, it's just in my blood from having been raised in this era.
It's true. Big cars.
No,
just give me
limousines.
A wide vehicle. Even if it's close, like the level right below limousine, I'm still in like a huge Cadillac.
Okay.
Like my aunt used to ride around in a Buick that was like, it was like the length of like a float from like the Rose Bowl parade.
Have you ever been in like a limo with those jacuzzis, and that feels like the epitome of 80s? I've never done that.
I've never seen one in real life.
You've never seen one in Jersey, Frank? Yes, I've seen them. I've seen them on like highways.
I've seen Hummer limos, tons of Hummer limos, but I've never actually
seen. The hot tub is not always outside. Sometimes the hot tub's covered, so you wouldn't necessarily know.
Oh, so
Pope-mobile style. It's a little clear dome around the hot tub.
Okay, sorry, that was important, but let's get to our awards. Jamel, as we mentioned, we give out awards for the episode, and our first award is A Point with a View. This goes to the character with the best politics in this movie.
Ooh. The best politics in the movie.
I think it's, at least for me, I think it's Ophelia, Jamie Lee Curtis's character, because she, for inexplicable reasons, other than she thinks like she'll eventually make money off of Dan Aykroyd in the end, she like takes him in. She has like what appears to be unlimited empathy for him and his situation, even though there's like nothing redeeming about him when she meets him. I guess that's my answer. Is there someone else that I'm not thinking of? Who do you guys got?
I can't think of my guy's name, but I think it's one of the dudes, one of the big guys that Eddie Murphy's in lockup with.
Mm-hmm.
The dude who's just accusing him of lying. He's like, "Man, we saw you. You said you had a limousine." Yeah, and I think it's the dude who says, "Yeah."
I'm with you because they have a nice turn. Then they go to the party and then they're like, we like you. You're not lying. And then Eddie Murphy's like, get
lying,
out.
Man. Being mean to these guys who could have beat his ass in holding.
I'm with you. I think it goes to them.
Okay, our next award is called Despicable You. This goes to the character or characters with the worst politics in the movie. I feel like this is an easy one unless there's a secret candidate, but I think the Duke brothers, those are like two of the most despicable men ever depicted on screen, I thought.
Mm-hmm. The Dukes. Yeah. The Dukes. Yeah, it's the Dukes. I'm trying to think. Maybe potentially, was there anyone above them? I guess like Wall Street.
Well, their guy, their hatchet man guy, the guy who they have running around causing mischief, who ends up in the gorilla suit.
Mm-hmm.
Beaks.
But he's also
Clarence
just working. He's
Beaks.
A working man. I don't know. Beaks, I had some sympathy for. I felt like Beaks was still part of that. I mean, Beaks was no different than anyone else trying to just
Beaks was
get
a hater.
piece.
Beaks was a huge hater. I would not hang out with Beaks. I'm glad Beaks is getting his money, but me and Beaks, I'm not hitting the weed with Beaks.
Yeah, I got no love for Beaks, but I think the Dukes articulate a very like vulgar worldview like over and over and over again. And I thought like the message that just like, we're all just a game to these rich people. I thought that was really strong. Like these guys are literally just playing like a parlor game with these two men's lives. And we come to find out that their bet is just for $1. So it's just like, they're not even, it's such a, like, they're so cheap throughout the whole movie. I love how all of the workers around them are constantly just like, what a fucking piece of shit. Like, what a scumbag. Like, I like how everyone was commenting on how awful they were.
I guess one piece of critique we didn't totally hit on, which I think is important, is like that it does speak to that, the philanthropic, like the different types of evil rich white people that, like, at the end of the day, they're the same, but they try and differentiate. They try and fuck with you a little, like differentiating the brothers. Like, oh, he means so well. Can pull them up by their bootstraps. Like, anybody could be a capitalist if you just fucking, they try and disguise the idea of nurture, like nature versus nurture, but they try and disguise the like concept of, oh, we're going to be aware of nurture, but then like for demonic purposes, where in reality, if you're taking that as a worldview and you understand the whole system needs to change and you give a fuck, but like they don't give a, it's almost worse because they kind of comprehend certain aspects of these things, but at the end of the day, they just truly are evil. Did any of that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah.
Yeah. They get to be rich again and coming to America. It sucks. I don't know if you guys ever seen that one.
Yeah,
I have.
He just hands him a pile of money for no reason. What the fucking hell?
All right, and our last award is called A Star is Scorned. This goes to the supporting character that this movie should actually be about.
Oh, well, now I will say Ophelia, obviously.
Yeah, I would watch an Ophelia movie. I thought Jamie Lee Curtis was so good in this.
I thought she was, I thought she was as good as she could be. I didn't think there was much to be good at.
Sure.
Yeah, they kind of... I would love to see this movie without the random no shirt off.
This movie, I mean, honestly, but this movie without the random no shirt, then there's literally nothing for her to do. They didn't write her a storyline. But like, yes, her own starring Ophelia. I think that's probably a movie we've seen many times. I would want to see. I thought the butler was really fascinating and had the most interesting take. Like, knew all the stuff. Had clearly this was not his first time doing this. There's also another world where I was like, is this could be like a crazy Eric Andre show? Like, this is a wild prank, and I love prank shows. So I was like, if they were gonna go there, I wish they'd like gone there even further and like really pranked these guys.
Yeah, it's Coleman, and then they bring in Mr. Bean. I'm imagining Coleman and Mr. Bean together, like whenever he goes back across the pond, it's him and Mr. Bean just running amok out there.
But he wasn't British, was he, Coleman?
He was not from Philly. That's all I could do. That's all I knew for sure.
Okay.
I would also watch the movie of like what happens to the Dukes immediately after this movie finishes. Like, I just want to watch those guys suffer.
Yeah.
Like, they just lost
One
all
brother
of
has the heart attack.
He does. And I thought that was a great moment when they were like, your brother is dying on the floor, and the one Duke was like, fuck him. Like, it's like, yeah, these guys are absolutely ruthless.
Yeah.
I don't give a fuck. Yeah.
All right, well, that is it for the awards. Jamel, before we wrap, we like to discuss with our guests how we try to practice our values in our everyday life, whether they're anti-capitalist values or just progressive values. So is there anything that you do in your life, like either a practice you engage in, an organization you work with? What is that? How does that translate for you in your everyday life?
I don't know why my first thought was using public transit in Los Angeles. Now in New York,
oh yeah,
it's like, it's understood. It's what's done because it's what's right. But when you're in LA, they make it harder to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like, I don't know, my time on the 81 bus I feel like I'm giving back when I'm on the bus every time. And I can't think of anybody else. I must have done something good.
I love I love your interpretation of the question, which is you're like, what did I do good?
What good thing have I done?
I think that's a really good one.
It's
and
beautiful.
Especially like, you're right, in Los Angeles, because like New York's got good public transit. Boston, I've heard Chicago's, like, there are cities that have like figured it out. LA specifically was like, we used to have good public transit, then we demolished it all because we all like kowtowed to like the auto and like gas industries.
And they're not gonna get me, bro. I'm on the I'm taking the blue line to the gold line to the red line, purple line, pink line. I don't give a fuck, man. Flyaway bus. I'm not using Uber for anything other than not getting a DUI, bro. That's it.
That is a very good one. And a big sacrifice, because you're adding, I would imagine, time onto your...
An hour and a half every direction to anywhere I go. Minimum 90. I have to budget an extra 90 minutes to go to any neighborhood that is not my neighbor. I live in Highland Park now. Go to motherfucking Eagle Rock, 90 minutes.
Wow.
One bus.
Damn.
Wow.
That's a very.
Damn,
that's
sorry, flashbacks. Now I'm going through. I'm having war flashbacks in my head.
Now you're like, I gotta start a petition. We gotta get some more fucking bus lines and train lines in here.
They should, man. And it's like now they're working on the train, but the only reason they're working on the train is because they're bringing the Olympics, which is
that's right.
fucked up in itself. You know, everybody. I know you guys have probably talked about the fact that the Olympics just fucks whatever town they go through.
Mm-hmm.
We
And
haven't
it's like,
yet, but yeah.
They're going to try to make all the people in Skid Row disappear for the Olympics.
Oh, when is it coming to LA?
Like the 2028, I think.
Oh,
28
yeah,
or
that's
20,
disastrous.
yeah, I think it's 28. It's 28, and right now what's going on is they're just like pretending like nothing's happening, and the train is insane. Like the red line has just become like it's like a level in Streets of Rage.
Oh,
it's
damn.
crazy down. It's crazy down there. You got to jump over barrels. Nah, it's crazy down there.
Wow.
And then by the time 2028 comes, they're gonna try to be like, oh, look how nice we are.
Yeah, I know they're also planning on like beefing up the police force specifically for 2028. They're like, we need to add like X 100 or 1,000 more cops by 2028 in order to be ready for the Olympics.
I can't even visualize 2028 right now.
Yeah,
if anyone's interesting, I know the group No Olympics has done a lot of organizing in LA around this exact issue. So, all right, Jamel, we'll let you go. Really grateful for you being here. Where can our audience find you and your work?
You can find me at Broccoli House on Instagram. You can go to broccolihouse.com if you want to. I don't know who's going to be there. I got some links. I got a bunch of stuff. I got like too many things to promote. So
all right.
Just find them all.
We'll put your stuff in the show notes.
Thank you, bro.
Yeah.
Thank you so much
Jamel,
for being here.
Yeah, thanks, dude.
Appreciate y'all, man. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you've been enjoying the show, please consider becoming a supporter. Again, you can find all of that info at mvcpod.com.
For next week's movie, we'll be watching the 1997 global smash hit, some may even call it a cultural phenomenon, Titanic.
Thank you all.